Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and compare Google Messages and compare it against Samsung Messages and see which specific application, the exact messenger that you should actually use. Now, I definitely do think that there are definitely overlaps, but I don't think there's one that you should definitely use. I'll be honest, Google Messages is the one that I would prefer people using for the most part, because that is the one that Samsung has kind of switched over to completely, it looks like. So it's like the default one as of this point. So that's the one I would probably recommend using. But I think Samsung Messages was good. I think it's still decent if you're still using it. But Google Messages is basically the one that's going to be bringing more features overall. And that should be the one that you should be using. And because Google Messages is almost the default for a majority of Android phones, including stock Android phones, it really only makes sense for you to use that specific application rather than Samsung Messages, in my opinion. So keep that in mind. Now, moving on to basically some advantages and features between both, I would say as of right now, the UI on Google Messages does look substantially better than the UI on Samsung Messages. I feel like within Samsung Messages, it looks a little bit more, it looks too Samsung-y in my opinion, like too much like One UI. Reminds me too much of like the settings application, to be honest, which is very funny. I feel like with something like Google Messages, it definitely looks a lot cleaner. And that is something I've always preferred and liked. And I will say sometimes when you're actually sending stuff, if you're actually going through the texting panel, the Google Messages layout looks a little bit cleaner. And also one other big thing is that if you are actually trying to enable some cool features that's built within, like adding a like or adding emoji to a reply and different things like that, Google Messages, although I think Samsung Messages can do this now too, Google Messages, is basically the forefront into building out all those RCS features. And, Samsung's probably right there too. But because Google is spending all that time and money already building out Android, they're going to add in all those cool features within, Google Messages that Samsung Messages may not actually have. Now, of course, Samsung Messages already has RCS built in, that's quite clear. But if there are certain new features, that are being brought over, I'm probably going to believe that if, let's just say you have like some sort of like iMessage capability coming out in the future somehow, I'm pretty sure Google Messages would be the first one to have that type of capability over something like Samsung Messages, if I'm being honest. So keep that in the back of your head as well. And not the end of the world, but it's also one other thing to keep in mind. Now, another thing that I love about Google Messages is that you can actually go ahead, if you want, you can pair up Google Messages for your, web browser. So if you're on your PC, you can actually use Google Messages on your PC without having to do anything crazy. You just have to go and basically set it up. And it's a really cool thing that you have to do. It's just like you don't have to do anything wild. You just go ahead and make your way over to messages.google.com. You can go ahead and, scan a little barcode or QR code, and then you can go ahead and see all your messages on your, web browser. And I think that in and of itself is a really cool thing. Samsung probably has some feature like that too, but I guarantee you, with Google being as big as of a company as they are, it is really nice that you do have that type of capability right from there, rather than, having to rely on just texting from your phone. And that's the one thing, whenever I've compared Google Messages to iMessage, which I've done a few times, I've always found that, one of my favorite things is being able to see all of my notifications at the same time on like all my devices, on my Mac, on my watch, on my phone. Like having everything right there is really nice. And that's something I've always preferred, if I'm being honest. Now, I will say there's a lots and lots of overlap between both these as well. I mean, you can send images, you can send videos, you can basically send emojis if you want to, you can send your real-time location or a location, you can send files, you can schedule messages, you can do smart, and you can do basically adding messages to subjects, which is interesting. But there are some things you can do with Google Messages that you cannot do with Samsung Messages. For one, apparently, you cannot send stickers within Samsung Messages unless you are actually using the Samsung keyboard. It looks like if you're using Gboard, that may not work, so that's kind of weird. You can send GIFs inside of Samsung Messages, which is kind of weird, it looks like, but you can do that within Google Messages. And those are pretty much, I would say Google Messages has more features built in overall than Samsung Messages. But I will still say with Samsung Messages, it's still a good application. Like if you're not even too reliant on, sending too many things, or if you don't really care about those types of things too much, then you might be totally okay with something like Samsung Messages. It's really not that big of a deal, and it's still a very, very good application. But I would say Google Messages is probably the one that I've always looked at, and I've kind of been a little bit more lenient to Google Messages, just because Samsung did kind of switch over to that one completely, and that one seems to me to be the one that probably I would recommend more people to buy, or to just use, not buy. It's a free application, you can use it. But I think Samsung Messages is okay, but definitely if I have to pick one, Google Messages is 1000% the way to go. So that pretty much covers that up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.